The combat arena was a massive dome made of the same crystal material as the Kethver trees, but polished smooth and filled with different environments. One section was desert, another was swamp, and a third was frozen tundra. In the center sat bleachers filled with representatives from dozens of alien species, all watching to see if humans could fight as well as they could survive. Commander Amy Torres stood in the preparation area with her team, watching through the transparent walls as their first opponent entered the arena. The creature was unlike anything they had seen before. It looked like a living statue made of sharp crystal, about 8 feet tall and covered in edges that could cut through steel. When it moved, it made a sound like breaking glass. Shard Singer, Dr. Maya Patel read from the datapad they had been given. From a world where the entire surface is made of living crystal. Their bodies are weapons, and they can vibrate their limbs to cut through almost anything. How do we fight something like that? Asked Lisa Grant, staring at the creature with obvious fear. We don't fight it, Amy replied. We outsmart it. The first combat was between Ben Clark and the Shard Singer. Ben had volunteered because he had the most combat experience, but as he entered the arena, he knew his military training had not prepared him for this. The Shard Singer moved like a dancer, its crystal limbs flowing through the air with deadly grace. Ben's first instinct was to use his sidearm, but the energy bolts just bounced off the creature's crystal skin. When the alien charged, Ben dove to the side, rolling across the sand of the desert section. The Shard Singer's arm sliced through the air where his head had been a moment before. The joints, Maya called out from the observation area. All crystals have weak points where they join together. Ben nodded and began to move differently. Instead of trying to fight the creature head-on, he used the different environments to his advantage. He led the Shard Singer into the swamp section where the thick mud slowed its movements. While it struggled to maintain its balance, Ben used a fallen log as a lever, jamming it into the joint where the creature's leg met its body. The Shard Singer shattered at the joint, toppling over with a sound like a cathedral bell falling. It was not dead, but it could not continue fighting. Ben had won without killing his opponent, something that had never happened in the arena before. The second fight was between Rick Martinez and a creature called a Void Touched. This alien looked like a cloud of gas barely held together in a roughly humanoid shape. It could become solid or gaseous at will, making it nearly impossible to hit with conventional weapons. Rick watched the creature carefully as it circled him in the frozen tundra section. When it attacked, turning solid just long enough to strike, Rick was ready. He had studied the pattern of its attacks and noticed something the alien observers had missed. The creature had to become fully solid for a split second when it changed states. Using a technique he had learned as an engineer, Rick created a spark with some wire from his equipment. The tiny flame was barely visible, but when the Void Touched passed through it while changing states, the creature's gaseous form ignited like a torch. It was not seriously hurt, but it was shocked enough to surrender. The third and final combat was the most dangerous. Amy faced off against a warrior from the Scales of Honor, a species that looked like a cross between a dragon and a crocodile. The creature was twice her size, covered in natural armor, and armed with claws that could tear through steel. This is Captain Morrison, Jake's voice came through Amy's earpiece. The entire Alliance is watching this fight. Whatever happens, you've already made humanity proud. Amy nodded, but she was not planning to lose. The reptilian warrior charged across the arena, its massive claws extended. Amy waited until the last second, then dropped flat on her back and kicked upward with both feet. The alien's momentum carried it over her, and it crashed into the crystal wall. The fight that followed was brutal. The reptilian warrior was stronger and faster than Amy, but she had something it did not expect. She fought dirty. When it grabbed her arm, she bit its wrist. When it tried to pin her down, she threw sand in its eyes. Every trick she had learned in her military training, every desperate move she had ever used came into play. The alien warriors in the stands began to murmur among themselves. They had expected to see honor and glory, but the human was fighting like survival was more important than pride. She rolled between the creature's legs, jumped on its back, and used her weight to throw it off balance. She fights like prey, General Tath observed from the stands. No, Zarthik corrected. She fights like a predator that evolved from prey. Look at her movements. Every action is calculated to survive, not to look impressive. Amy's chance came when the reptilian warrior slipped on the ice in the tundra section. As it fell, she grabbed a shard of crystal from the arena floor and jammed it into the joint where the creature's arm met its shoulder. The alien roared in pain and fury, but it could not continue fighting with its dominant arm disabled. Yield, Amy panted, standing over her fallen opponent. I don't want to kill you, but I will if you make me. The reptilian warrior looked up at her with something like respect in its eyes. I yield, it said in its own language. The arena fell silent. In 3 fights, the humans had won using tactics that none of the alien species had expected. They had not relied on strength or natural weapons. Instead, they had used their intelligence, their adaptability, and their willingness to do whatever it took to survive, but their trials were far from over. As Amy and her team were escorted back to their quarters, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed, and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. What's happening? Lisa asked a passing Kethver technician. The Devourers, the alien replied, its 4 eyes wide with terror. They have returned. All ships are ordered to battle stations immediately. Amy looked out the nearest window and saw space filled with ships unlike anything in the Alliance fleet. They were dark and angular, covered in what looked like mechanical growths. As she watched, one of the ships extended massive arms and grabbed a Kethver vessel, pulling it apart, like it was made of paper. The 3rd trial, Zarthik announced over the station's communication system, has begun. The Alliance faces its greatest enemy, and humanity will be tested in the fires of real war. Amy felt her heart sink. They had passed the survival trial and the combat trial, but now they faced something far worse. They were about to fight in a war against an enemy that had been terrorizing the galaxy for 1,000 years. Get to the ship, she told her team. It looks like we're about to find out what humans can really do. The next morning arrived with the sound of ceremonial horns echoing across the academy grounds. Lisa Martinez stood in formation with 300 other cadets in the main assembly hall, watching as General Krex's transport ship descended from the sky. The vessel was massive, painted in the deep red and gold colors of the Vorthan Empire, with weapon ports that reminded everyone of the general's military power. Lisa had barely slept the night before. Her plan was dangerous and probably stupid, but she could not shake the memory of Zorth's words or the laughter of the other cadets. More importantly, she could not forget the look of shame on Jake Peterson's face when the other aliens had dismissed humans as inferior. General Krex emerged from his transport surrounded by an honor guard of Vorthan warriors. The general was enormous even by Vorthan standards, standing nearly 9 feet tall with scales that looked like they had been forged from dark metal. Scars covered his arms and face, each one telling a story of battles won. On his chest hung the Diamond Star of Conquest, the highest military honor in the galaxy, earned through victories over dozens of different species. Director Voss, the Academy's 4-armed Zelani commandant, stepped forward to greet the general. General Krex, welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. We are honored by your presence. Krex's yellow eyes swept over the assembled cadets. Director Voss, I am pleased to observe the next generation of warriors, though I see you still waste resources training species that lack the basic requirements for military service. His gaze lingered on the human cadets, and Lisa felt her stomach tighten. She knew he was talking about her people. The formal ceremony began with Director Voss introducing General Krex to the cadets. The general stepped forward to address the assembly, his voice carrying easily across the vast hall without amplification. Young warriors, he began, you are here to learn the arts of war. But war is not a game or an academic exercise. War is the ultimate test of species superiority. It reveals which races are born to command and which are meant to serve. Lisa felt her hands clench into fists at her sides. Throughout my career, I have developed what is known as the doctrine of species superiority. This doctrine is based on careful study of every known species and their military capabilities. Some species are natural warriors, blessed with strength, speed, and the killer instinct necessary for victory. Others are better suited to support roles, providing supplies and maintenance to the true fighters. General Krex turned to look directly at the human cadets. Humans, for example, rank 43rd out of 47 known species in military capability. They lack natural weapons, armor, or enhanced reflexes. Their reaction times are slow, their strength is limited, and they break easily under pressure. While they may have some use in logistics and technical support, they have no place in actual combat. The words hit Lisa like physical blows. Around her, she heard alien cadets murmuring agreement. Some were nodding their heads. Others were looking at the humans with expressions of pity or disgust. Jake Peterson, standing 3 rows ahead of Lisa, had his shoulders hunched as if he was trying to disappear. Kelly Brooks was staring at the floor. The other human cadets looked like they wanted to run away, but Lisa had heard enough. She stepped forward, breaking formation. "General Krex?" The hall fell silent. 300 cadets turned to stare at her. Director Voss looked shocked. General Krex's yellow eyes fixed on Lisa with the intensity of a predator studying prey. "I formally challenge the validity of your doctrine of species superiority," Lisa said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent hall. Gasps echoed through the assembly. Several alien cadets laughed, thinking they had heard wrong. A few instructors started moving toward Lisa, but General Krex raised one massive clawed hand to stop them. "You dare question my doctrine, little human?" His voice was like distant thunder. "I have studied the military capabilities of every species in this galaxy for over 50 years. I have commanded fleets that conquered star systems. I have personally defeated champions from dozens of different races. My doctrine is based on facts, not wishful thinking." Lisa felt her heart pounding, but she kept her voice steady. "Then prove it, General. If humans are as inferior as you claim, it should be easy to demonstrate. What exactly are you proposing?" Krex asked, his tone dangerous. "Give me 10 minutes in a combat trial against your finest cadet. If I lose, I will publicly apologize to this entire assembly and request immediate transfer to a supply division. I will also acknowledge that humans have no place in combat roles." The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Several cadets laughed outright. Director Voss stepped forward, clearly trying to intervene. "Cadet Martinez, this is highly irregular. You cannot simply challenge, but if I win," Lisa continued, ignoring the director and keeping her eyes fixed on General Krex, "you will admit that your doctrine is flawed. You will acknowledge that military superiority cannot be determined by physical characteristics alone." Cadet Captain Zorth pushed through the crowd of cadets to stand before the general. "Grandfather, allow me to accept this challenge. I will show this arrogant human what real warriors can do." Lisa had not known that Zorth was related to General Krex, but it made sense. The family resemblance was clear in their size and bearing. "General." Krex studied Lisa for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, but Lisa could see calculation in his eyes. He was clearly weighing the risks and benefits of accepting her challenge. "You understand the stakes, human?" he asked finally. "When you lose, you will not only apologize and transfer to a supply division, you will also publicly acknowledge that your entire species has no place in frontline military roles. Your failure will be broadcast throughout the galaxy as proof of human inferiority." Lisa felt a cold chill run down her spine. The stakes had just become much higher than she had planned. If she lost, she would not just be humiliating herself. She would be damaging the reputation of every human in the galaxy, but if she backed down now, nothing would change. Humans would continue to be dismissed and looked down upon. They would remain second-class citizens in a galaxy that saw them as useful only for menial tasks. "I accept your terms," Lisa said. "Very well," General Krex declared, his voice carrying across the hall. In 2 hours, we will conduct a formal combat trial. Cadet Martinez will face Cadet Captain Zorth in single combat. The trial will last exactly 10 minutes. Victory will be determined by surrender, incapacitation, or death. The word death sent another wave of shocked murmurs through the assembly. Combat trials at the academy were usually conducted with non-lethal weapons and safety protocols. But this was no longer a school exercise. This was a formal military challenge, Director. Voss tried one more time to intervene. General, surely we can conduct this trial under standard academy safety protocols. No, Krex cut him off. This human has questioned fundamental military doctrine. Such a challenge requires a response with real consequences. If she believes her species is equal to ours, she must be willing to risk everything to prove it. Lisa felt the weight of every eye in the hall. The human cadets looked terrified. The alien cadets looked excited, like they were about to witness an execution. The instructors looked concerned but unwilling to challenge a general of Krex's stature. 2 hours, General Krex announced. Use that time to prepare yourself, human, and to say goodbye to your friends. The assembly was dismissed, but nobody moved for several seconds. They were all staring at Lisa, trying to process what had just happened. A 19-year-old human cadet had just challenged the most respected military theorist in the galaxy. She had bet her life and her species' reputation on a 10-minute combat trial against an opponent who had never lost a fight. As the cadets finally began to disperse, Lisa found herself surrounded by her human classmates. Jake Peterson grabbed her arm. Lisa, what have you done? He whispered, Zorth has been training since he was 5 years old. He's never lost a combat trial. He's 50 pounds heavier than you and twice as strong. I know, Lisa replied quietly. Then, why? Kelly Brooks asked. Why would you risk this? Lisa looked around at her fellow humans. They were all staring at her with expressions of fear and confusion. They could not understand why she would take such a risk. Because someone has to, Lisa said. If we don't stand up for ourselves, who will? How long are we going to let them? Tell us we're inferior? How long are we going to accept being treated like second-class citizens? But you could die, Jake said. Maybe, Lisa admitted. But if I do nothing, we're already dead? We're just walking corpses in a galaxy that sees us as useful only for carrying supplies and fixing equipment. She looked toward the exit where General Krex was leaving with his honor guard. The general turned back once to look at her, and Lisa met his gaze without flinching. 2 hours, she said to herself. 2 hours to figure out how to beat the unbeatable. As her classmates walked away, shaking their heads and whispering among themselves, Lisa stood alone in the empty assembly hall. She had just made the biggest bet of her life, and she had no idea how she was going to win, but she was going to try. Lisa Martinez walked quickly through the academy corridors, her mind racing as she tried to figure out how to survive the next 2 hours. Behind her, she could hear the excited chatter of alien cadets discussing the upcoming combat trial. Most of them were already planning to watch her lose. She found Jake Peterson waiting outside her dormitory room, along with Kelly Brooks and the other human cadets. Their faces showed a mixture of worry and disbelief. Lisa, you have to call this off, Jake said as soon as he saw her. Go to Director Voss. Tell him you made a mistake. There's no shame in backing down from an impossible fight. Yes, there is, Lisa replied, opening her door. There's shame in giving up without trying. There's shame in letting them think they're right about us. She went to her personal locker and began pulling out equipment. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice remained steady. Zorth is 2 years older than you, Kelly said. He's been training in Vorthan combat methods his whole life. He knows 17 different fighting styles. His people are literally built for war. I know all that, Lisa said, laying her gear on the bed. But knowing something and understanding it are different things. She pulled out her personal tablet and began accessing the Academy's database. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen as she searched for information. What are you looking for? Jake asked, watching her work. Everything, Lisa said. Vorthan. Biology, their combat training methods, their military history, their fighting styles. If I'm going to beat Zorth, I need to understand how he thinks. She found what she was looking for and began reading quickly. The other humans gathered around her, reading over her shoulder. "Look at this," Lisa said, pointing to a section about Vorthan military training. "They learn 17 classical combat forms, but they're all based on the same principles. Honor, direct confrontation, overwhelming force. They fight the way their ancestors fought for thousands of years." "That's because it works," Kelly said. "They've conquered 17 star systems using those methods." "Against enemies who fought back the same way," Lisa replied. "But what happens when they face an enemy who doesn't follow their rules?" She kept reading, diving deeper into the files. The other humans watched her with growing confusion. "Lisa, what are you thinking?" Jake asked. Instead of answering, Lisa pulled up a different section of the database. She was looking at classified military files that most cadets didn't have access to, but her academic standing gave her clearance for research purposes. "Here," she said, finding what she wanted. "A report on human military performance during the Cathar border conflicts 3 years ago. It was buried in the bureaucratic files, but it's all here." She read silently for several minutes, her eyes moving rapidly across the screen. The other humans waited impatiently. "What does it say?" Kelly finally asked. Lisa looked up at them with something like excitement in her eyes. "It says that human soldiers performed far better than predicted in combat situations. The report mentions our adaptability, our ability to function under extreme stress, and our capacity for what they call tactical creativity." "Tactical creativity?" Jake repeated. "The ability to improvise new solutions when standard methods fail," Lisa explained. "The report says that humans consistently surprised enemy forces by using unconventional tactics that weren't covered in standard military doctrine." She closed the tablet and began gathering different pieces of equipment. Instead of standard combat gear, she was selecting lighter armor, modified weapons, and tools that made the other humans frown in confusion. "Lisa, what are you doing?" Kelly asked. "You need the heaviest armor you can carry. You need the biggest weapons available." "No," Lisa said, checking the power cells on a small device. "That's how Zorth expects me to fight. That's how everyone expects me to fight, but that's not how humans really fight." She walked to her desk and pulled out a thick book that none of them had seen before. The cover was worn and the pages were filled with handwritten notes. "What is that?" Jake asked. "Human military history," Lisa said. "I've been studying it for months. Not the sanitized version they teach in galactic history classes, but the real thing. Every major battle, every tactical innovation, every time humans faced impossible odds and found a way to win." She opened the book to a page covered with diagrams and notes. Thermopylae. 300 Spartans held off an army of thousands by using terrain and tactics their enemies didn't expect. Agincourt. English longbowmen defeated French knights by refusing to fight the way knights were supposed to fight. She flipped through more pages. Stalingrad, Guadalcanal, the Tet Offensive. Over and over again, humans won battles by adapting to situations their enemies couldn't predict. "But those are ancient history," Kelly said. "This is modern combat, with energy weapons and powered armor." "The weapons change," Lisa replied, "but the principles don't. The side that adapts faster wins. The side that can think beyond standard doctrine wins." She continued gathering equipment, but her selection seemed random to the other humans. A grappling hook, smoke grenades, a small cutting tool, various electronic devices they didn't recognize. "Lisa, none of that is going to help you in a straight fight," Jake said. "Zorth will be wearing full combat armor and carrying military-grade weapons. You need to match his firepower." "No," Lisa said again. "I need to make this fight something he's never trained for." She spent the next hour studying everything she could find about the Academy's combat arena. The facility could simulate different environments, and she needed to understand every possible advantage she could gain. The arena was a large enclosed space with adjustable terrain features. It could create forests, deserts, urban environments, or open battlefields. The walls were lined with energy barriers that could stop weapons fire, but were transparent to observers. Lisa pulled up the technical specifications and began making notes. The arena's environmental controls, the positioning of the observation areas, the emergency systems, the communication equipment. She was memorizing every detail. "What are you planning?" Jake asked, watching her work. "I'm planning to survive," Lisa said, "and maybe to teach General Krex something about human military capabilities." Meanwhile, across the academy, Zorth was preparing in the traditional Vorthan manner. He meditated for 30 minutes, focusing his mind on the coming battle. He performed strength exercises to warm up his muscles. He practiced the 17 classical combat forms, moving through the ancient patterns with fluid precision. His grandfather, General Krex, watched the preparation with approval. "Remember, Zorth, this is not just about defeating one human. This is about proving our doctrine to the entire galaxy. When you win, it will demonstrate once and for all that some species are born to be warriors while others are meant to serve." "I understand, grandfather," Zorth replied, executing a perfect strike sequence. "The human will learn her place." Other alien cadets had gathered to watch Zorth's preparation. They whispered among themselves about the coming battle, placing bets on how quickly it would end. Most thought the fight would be over in less than 5 minutes. "The human is brave," one Zilani cadet said. "But bravery without strength is just stupidity." "She's fighting for her species' honor," another replied. "But honor won't stop a plasma blast." Back in her room, Lisa was making final preparations. She had changed into lighter armor that would allow her to move faster. Her weapons were smaller than standard issue but calibrated for rapid deployment. She carried equipment that most of the other cadets would consider useless in combat. "Are you ready?" Jake asked as time began to run out. Lisa looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was about to face an opponent who was bigger, stronger, and more experienced than she was. An opponent who had never lost a fight, and whose species was bred for warfare, but she was also about to prove something that no one in the galaxy seemed to understand. Humans didn't win battles by being the strongest or the fastest. They won by being the most adaptable. "I'm ready," she said. The walk to the combat arena felt like the longest journey of Lisa's life. Word had spread throughout the academy, and cadets from all species lined the corridors to watch her pass. Some looked at her with respect for her courage. Others looked at her with pity for her stupidity. Most looked at her like she was already dead. At the arena entrance, Director Voss made one final attempt to stop the trial. "Cadet Martinez, I strongly advise you to reconsider. This challenge has escalated beyond reasonable bounds. No one will think less of you for withdrawing." "I will," Lisa replied. "And more importantly, every human in the galaxy will." She entered the arena preparation area, where weapons and armor were waiting. Standard protocol would have her select the heaviest armor and most powerful weapons available. Instead, she chose equipment that made the watching instructors shake their heads in confusion. Through the transparent walls, she could see the arena itself. General Krex had chosen a rocky canyon environment similar to battlefields where Vorthan forces had historically excelled. The terrain was rough and uneven, with narrow passages and high walls, perfect for what Lisa had in mind. In the opposite preparation area, Zorth was suiting up in full Vorthan battle armor. His plasma rifle was military grade, capable of punching through reinforced walls. His energy sword could cut through almost any material. He looked like a walking tank. Lisa looked like a scout. 10 minutes, she whispered. The arena doors slid open with a soft hiss, and Lisa Martinez stepped into the rocky canyon environment that General Krex had chosen for the combat trial. The simulated sun cast harsh shadows between the stone formations, and loose gravel crunched under her boots. Behind the transparent energy barriers that surrounded the arena, hundreds of cadets and instructors had gathered to watch. On the opposite side of the canyon, Zorth emerged from his preparation area like a walking fortress. His Vorthan battle armor gleamed under the artificial sunlight, each piece designed to deflect energy weapons and absorb impact. His plasma rifle was held ready in his massive hands, and his energy sword hung at his side like a promise of violence. Lisa looked tiny by comparison. Her lighter armor left her arms and legs partially exposed, trading protection for mobility. Her weapons were smaller, her equipment stranger. Several alien observers laughed when they saw her, thinking she had made a fatal mistake in her equipment. Choices. General Krex stood in the central observation platform, his yellow eyes fixed on the arena floor. "The rules are simple," his voice boomed through the arena's speakers. 10 minutes of combat. Victory by surrender, incapacitation, or death. No outside assistance. No mercy. Director Voss activated the arena's timer. Combat begins in 10 seconds. Lisa felt her heart pounding as she moved toward the center of the canyon. Zorth was walking directly toward her, his movements confident and controlled. He showed no fear, no doubt. Why should he? He had never lost a fight. 5 seconds, Director Voss announced. Lisa closed her eyes for just a moment, thinking about every battle she had studied, every tactical principle she had learned. Humans didn't win by being stronger. They won by being smarter. Combat begins. Now, Zorth immediately raised his plasma rifle and fired 3 precise shots at Lisa's position. The energy bolts burned through the air where she had been standing, but Lisa was already moving. Instead of taking cover behind the rocks like any sensible fighter would do, she was running directly toward Zorth. The Vorthan cadet was confused. For exactly 2 seconds. This wasn't how combats were supposed to work. The smaller, weaker fighter was supposed to find cover and try to attack from a distance. Lisa was doing the opposite of everything he had been trained to expect, but Zorth recovered quickly. If the human wanted to close the distance, he would destroy her before she could reach him. He fired again, leading his target and calculating her movement pattern. Lisa wasn't moving in a pattern. She was bouncing between rocks, using her grappling hook to change direction in ways that shouldn't be possible, and creating her own cover. With smoke grenades, the canyon filled with gray clouds that made it impossible for Zorth to track her movements. In the observation area, alien cadets watched in confusion. "What is she doing?" a Zelani cadet asked. "This makes no tactical sense." "She's going to get herself killed," another replied, but General Krex was watching more carefully. His experienced eye could see something that the younger cadets missed. The human wasn't moving randomly. Every dodge, every direction change, every smoke grenade was part of a larger plan. Zorth fired into the smoke clouds, trying to hit Lisa through pure volume of fire. His plasma rifle lit up the canyon with bolt after bolt of deadly energy. Any one of those shots would end the fight instantly. None of them hit their target. Lisa burst out of the smoke cloud from an angle that Zorth hadn't expected, moving low and fast. She had used her cutting tool to loosen rocks from the canyon walls, creating a small avalanche that forced Zorth to change position. For the first time in the fight, he was reacting to her moves instead of controlling the battle. Zorth switched to his energy sword as Lisa closed the final distance. The weapon hummed to life, creating a blade of pure energy that could slice through steel. He swung it in a perfect arc, using the first of the 17 classical Vorthan combat forms. Lisa dropped into a slide that took her under his swing and between his legs. As she passed beneath him, she used her small cutting tool to slice through the power cables that connected his armor systems. Sparks flew as his suit lost power to several critical components. Zorth spun around, faster than most humans could follow, and brought his sword down in a crushing overhead strike. Lisa rolled sideways, and the energy blade struck the rocky ground, where she had been lying, sending up a shower of molten stone. "She's faster than she should be," Jake Peterson whispered from the observation area. He was watching his best friend fight for her life against an opponent who could kill her with a single mistake. But Lisa wasn't just being fast. She was being unpredictable. Every move she made violated standard combat doctrine. When Zorth expected her to retreat, she advanced. When he thought she would block, she redirected. When he assumed she would tire, she seemed to get more energetic. 3 minutes into the fight, something unprecedented began to happen. Zorth, the undefeated champion of the academy, started to look frustrated. His perfect forms were being countered by techniques that didn't exist in any military manual. His superior strength and reach meant nothing. When his opponent refused to fight the way she was supposed to, Lisa used the canyon terrain like a three-dimensional puzzle. She bounced shots off rock walls to hit Zorth from unexpected angles. She used her grappling hook to swing around stone formations, attacking from above and below. She created diversions with smoke and noise while moving to positions that shouldn't have been possible to reach. "This isn't fighting," Zorth snarled, swinging his sword in a wide arc that missed Lisa by inches. "This is running and hiding." "This is adapting," Lisa replied, using her smaller size to squeeze through a gap between rocks that Zorth couldn't follow her through. She emerged behind him and fired 3 quick shots at his armor's weak points. The energy bolts didn't penetrate, but they damaged more of his suit's systems. His targeting computer went offline, then his communications, then his environmental controls. Zorth was starting to overheat inside his armor. Vorthens were built for short, decisive battles. Extended combat in heavy armor was draining his strength faster than he had expected. At the 5-minute mark, Lisa made her first serious mistake. She misjudged a jump between rock formations and landed awkwardly, twisting her ankle. For a moment, she was vulnerable. Zorth saw his chance and charged forward, using his superior speed to close the distance before Lisa could recover. His energy sword swept toward her in a strike that would end the fight. Lisa did something that made every observer gasp. Instead of trying to dodge the strike, she threw herself directly into it. But as she moved, she activated every smoke grenade she had left, filling the immediate area with thick gray clouds. The energy sword passed through the space where Lisa had been, but she was no longer there. She had used the smoke as cover too. Roll under Zorth's guard and come up behind him. Her cutting tool was already at work on the seals of his armor. Zorth spun around to face her, but his movements were becoming sluggish. The damage to his armor systems was affecting his ability to fight. His targeting was off, his communications were dead, and his cooling system was failing. 7 minutes, Director Voss announced. Lisa backed away from Zorth, breathing hard but still moving. Her ankle was hurt, but she could still fight. More importantly, she could see that her opponent was starting to struggle. "You fight without honor," Zorth accused, raising his sword for another attack. "I fight to win," Lisa replied. She had been studying Zorth's fighting style throughout the battle, learning his patterns and preferences. The Vorthen combat forms were beautiful and effective, but they were also predictable. Each form led logically to the next, following sequences that had been practiced for generations. Lisa had never learned those sequences. She had learned something else entirely. At the 8-minute mark, Zorth made his final mistake. Frustrated by his inability to land a decisive blow, he abandoned his training and tried to overwhelm Lisa with brute force. He charged forward with his sword raised, putting all his strength behind a single devastating attack. Lisa had been waiting for exactly this moment. She dropped low, used her grappling hook to anchor herself to a rock, and swung her entire body in a spinning motion that brought her up behind Zorth as his momentum carried him past her position. Before he could turn around, Lisa was on his back. Her cutting tool sliced through the final connections that held his armor together. The heavy pieces fell away, leaving Zorth in just his basic undersuit. More importantly, Lisa's arm was wrapped around his throat, and her small sidearm was pressed against his neck. "Yield," she said quietly. Zorth tried to reach back and grab her, but Lisa's position made it impossible. He tried to slam her against the rocks, but she used her grappling hook to absorb the impact. He tried to shake her off, but her grip was unbreakable. 8 minutes and 37 seconds, Director Voss announced. The arena fell completely silent. 300 cadets and instructors stared in disbelief at the impossible scene before them. The human cadet was holding the Academy's champion in a submission hold that he couldn't break. "Yield," Lisa said again, tightening her grip slightly. Zorth struggled for a few more seconds, but it was useless. His armor was gone, his weapons were out of reach, and his opponent had him in a position where he The arena fell silent except for the sound of Lisa Martinez breathing hard as she stood over the defeated form of Cadet Captain Zorth. The Vorthan champion sat on the rocky ground, staring at his hands as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. His perfect armor lay scattered around him in broken pieces. General Krex stood motionless in the observation platform, his yellow eyes fixed on the scene below. For the first time in his long military career, his doctrine of species superiority had been proven wrong by a 19-year-old human who should have been dead within the first minute of combat. Lisa removed her helmet and looked up at the general. Her dark hair was damp with sweat, and a small cut on her cheek showed where a piece of flying rock had grazed her during the fight. But her brown eyes were steady and determined. "General Krex," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent arena, "I believe we need to discuss your doctrine." The general stepped down from the observation platform and walked into the arena through the main entrance. His massive form cast long shadows as he approached Lisa, who looked even smaller next to his imposing presence. "You fought well, human," he said slowly. "But one victory does not invalidate decades of military research." "You're right," Lisa replied, not backing down despite the general towering over her. "One victory doesn't prove anything by itself, but it does prove that your research was incomplete." She gestured toward Zorth, who was still sitting in stunned silence. "Your grandson is everything your doctrine says a perfect warrior should be. He's strong, fast, heavily armed, and trained in classical combat techniques. By every measure in your system, he should have destroyed me in minutes." General Krex's clawed hands clenched at his sides. "Then explain to me how you defeated him." Lisa walked to the center of the arena, where pieces of Zorth's armor lay scattered. She picked up a fragment of the chest plate and examined it. "You made a fundamental error in your doctrine, General. You assume that military superiority comes from physical advantages and traditional training. You measured strength, speed, natural weapons, and armor. But you never measured the most important thing, which is adaptability," Lisa said, dropping the armor piece. "Every species in this galaxy evolved to be the dominant predator on their home world. You all developed your combat styles to fight specific enemies in specific environments. Your techniques are perfect for the conditions you evolved in." She turned to face the observation areas where hundreds of alien cadets were watching in silence. "But humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being the strongest or fastest. We became dominant because we learned to adapt to any situation. Our world tried to kill us in every possible way. Predators, weather, disease, natural disasters, and most importantly, other humans." Lisa began walking as she spoke, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We didn't just fight one enemy. We fought thousands of different human cultures, each with their own tactics, weapons, and strategies. We fought in deserts and jungles, on mountains and plains, in cities and forests. We had to learn new ways to fight or we died." General Krex followed her movement with his eyes, listening carefully to every word. "That's why your doctrine failed. Today, you're not fighting a human warrior who follows one set of rules. You're fighting the accumulated military wisdom of 10,000 years of human warfare. Every technique I used came from a different culture, a different time period, a different type of battle." She stopped walking and faced the general directly. "When I used the grappling hook to change direction, that was naval boarding tactics from our age of sailing ships. When I created the rock slide, that was mountain warfare from our tribal periods. When I used smoke and misdirection, that was guerrilla fighting from our modern wars. When I adapted to Zorth's fighting style during the battle, that was what humans have always done when facing a superior enemy." Zorth finally stood up, his expression a mixture of shame and growing understanding. "I was fighting one opponent, but you were fighting like an entire species." "Exactly," Lisa said. "Humans don't fight to prove we're better than other species. We fight to survive. And survival means using whatever works regardless of honor, or tradition, or doctrine." General Krex was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had heard. Around the arena, alien cadets were whispering among themselves, some nodding in understanding, others shaking their heads in denial. You speak of adaptation and survival, the general said finally. But wars are won by organization, strategy, and overwhelming force. Individual tactics matter little in large-scale conflicts. Lisa smiled for the first time since the fight began. General, have you ever studied human military history in detail? Not the summary reports in galactic databases, but the actual battles? I have read the standard analyses, Krex replied carefully. Then you missed the most important lessons. Let me tell you about a battle called Stalingrad. Human forces were surrounded by a technologically superior enemy with better weapons, better armor, and better training. The humans should have surrendered. Instead, they adapted the entire city into a weapon. They turned urban warfare into something their enemies had never experienced. She began walking again, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. Or consider the Pacific War, where humans island-hopped across an ocean, adapting their tactics to each new environment. Or Vietnam, where they used knowledge of local terrain to defeat a technologically superior force. Or Afghanistan, where they learned to fight an enemy that changed tactics faster than traditional military doctrine could respond. General Krex listened with growing interest. These were not the sanitized reports he had read in official military databases. In every case, humans won by refusing to fight the way their enemies expected. They adapted faster than their opponents could respond. They used local resources, unconventional tactics, and rapid innovation to overcome superior firepower. Lisa stopped in front of the general and looked up at him. Your doctrine of species superiority ranks military capabilities based on individual physical traits. But human military capability isn't individual, it's collective. It's the ability to learn from every battle, adapt to every enemy, and innovate solutions that have never been tried before. She gestured toward the observation areas where alien military instructors were watching. How many of your war colleges teach courses on rapid tactical adaptation? How many of your training programs prepare soldiers to fight enemies using completely unknown methods? How many of your generals are trained to abandon their doctrine when it stops working? The questions hung in the air like accusations. General Krex looked around the arena, seeing his lifetime of military theory through new eyes. You're suggesting that human military doctrine is superior to all others? No, Lisa said firmly. I'm suggesting that there is no superior military doctrine. There are only doctrines that work in specific situations against specific enemies. The key to victory is knowing when to abandon your doctrine and try something new. She walked over to Zorth and extended her hand to help him stand. Your grandson is an excellent warrior by any reasonable measure, but he was fighting according to rules I was never taught. When I broke those rules, his training became a disadvantage instead of an advantage. Zorth accepted her hand and stood up, looking at Lisa with newfound respect. I have never lost a combat trial before today. That's because you never fought anyone who wasn't following the same basic principles you were, Lisa replied. Today, you learned what it's like to fight a human. General Krex slowly reached up and removed the Diamond Star of Conquest from his chest. The highest military honor in the galaxy gleamed in his massive clawed hand.